Grace. Grace is asked, how do I make my conflict as strong as possible? I write YA contemporary and my conflict is usually primarily internal. So it's hard to know how to make strong enough to fuel an entire story. Great question, Grace. I have this like long-standing debate with one of my fantasy writer friends. It's not a debate. We just kind of go back and forth and she says, I don't know how you can write contemporary. Like, how do you put in conflict if there's nobody dying or nobody waking up with a dagger at their throat? And I'm kind of like, how do you do fantasy where you have to like make up every detail of every piece of the world? So we have that kind of back and forth. But the truth is when you're writing contemporary, obviously your sources of conflict are very different than when you're writing a genre like fantasy or sci-fi. So a lot of contemporary novels, the source of conflict often comes from other characters. It often comes from situations that the character is in. And you're right that the conflict is usually internal because it's usually pushing up against flaws and wounds and whatever thematic elements you're putting in. It's usually kind of the whole plot is meant to kind of push them through those different flaws and those different wounds, and so that they come out the other side different. That being said, we as contemporary writers, we have to find ways to make those internal struggles external so that it's not a story entirely in the character's head. So there's plenty of ways to do that. You can put other people in the character's way, other people who automatically create struggle for the character. Check out our Crafting Dynamic Characters course. There's a lecture called Inner Struggle. And Mary breaks down really well how to use other characters and situations and different external things to create inner struggle. And the more we can bring our struggle outside of the character's head by introducing triggers that create that struggle and that inner conflict, the more visual it's going to feel and the more the reader is going to be engaged with it. If we sort of are just having the character walk around thinking about what's wrong with them or thinking about why they're hurting or why they're sad or whatever it is, it's not going to be very engaging to read about. But as soon as you sort of identify a character in your novel who has this problem or this struggle, and then you start throwing obstacles at them that are designed specifically to trigger that struggle, that's when you really get into the conflict of a contemporary. So, for example, when I wrote the Geography of Lost Things, or The Chaos of Standing Still, in The Chaos of Standing Still, it's about a girl who is struggling with grief. Well, that grief is very internal, right? So the way that I put that in is I started introducing these different triggers that would remind her of things about her friend who died. Or I would put I put a character in the story who would force her to talk about it and ask questions. And it's like just constantly poking those wounds. But you need external things to do that. So that would be my best piece of advice. And the other piece of advice I have, which I tell everyone, is break down other books in your genre. Read books in your genre and don't read them as a reader, read them as a writer. Identify what the conflict is. Identify every time the author has poked that conflict with an external element and take really good notes. And then the best way to learn how to write in your genre is to read in your genre. So those would be my pieces of advice for you, Grace. If you enjoyed this video, we've got a lot more on writingmastery.com. Check the description for links to our blog, free writing tools, and more. Happy writing.